Hey guys, Mustached Tom here to review the series, Stranger Things Season 5. This will be a spoiler review, so if you have not watched Stranger Things, I would highly recommend doing so first before watching this video. That is a lot of content to get through, but I would say, overall, pretty damn worth it. As an entire series, that is. With that being said, this video will be focusing on Season 5, but we'll still go kind of overall on the other seasons as well, since I looked over my own channel and realized I never actually reviewed Stranger Things at all. My bad. I was watching it too, I just didn't think to actually make a review on it at the time. But as Season 5, the known current last season, before spin-offs are now starting to happen apparently, but as far as the main thing is concerned, I guess this is the end of Stranger Things. So I thought it would be the responsible thing to review it now. So let me repeat that word, responsible. You see, the previous episode had came out, episode 7, the penultimate episode before the season finale, and a whole slew of people were getting all hot and heated because a coming out scene had entered into the facility. You have your people who say it's cringe, who say it doesn't need to be here at all, blah blah blah, because you can have gay characters coming out, I guess, in 2026, or in 2025, depending on, when you're viewing this, in the context of when it came out, versus, respectively. But, in all recollection, I decided to do, again, the responsible thing and wait for the season finale before making a full review. Instead of just waiting on one episode of a coming out story to, well, do the thing that anyone who had seen season 1 would know was going to happen. If you are if you have any sort of, I'm gonna say the words that are gonna be buzzwords, any media literacy, oh no. That must mean I'm a bad guy, that I can't review things good, because I've heard that if you say those two words, that disqualifies you from being able to, make any good points, or any valiant points. Salient points being the word. But anyways, I digress. So I didn't want to be a grifter, a slop grifter. I didn't want to just throw together some outrage and say, oh, it's just cringe. You see, I have standards, and I stick to my standards. If something is good, it is good. Those are my standards. I know that seems a bit of a circle, but there are things within that circle that make it a complete circle. So we will go over said things that make it a complete circle within that context. But in order to do that, we kind of have to go over Season 1 a little bit, but not too much. Because this is going to kind of tread over the other seasons as well, as I had mentioned. So, this is a story in which we have a whole bunch of kids who are just living their lives, playing some good old-fashioned Dungeons and Dragons in the 1980s. This is an era in which playing Dungeons and Dragons would have been considered demonic, which is what they literally have happen in the show. That's, relatable to the real life. This is something which was once referred to as the Satanic Panic. That's a real life thing. The Satanic Panic was a conjured political thing that happened in our real world. So you see, art often imitates reality, as it would turn out. But I digress. So they're doing their wholesome Dungeons and Dragons, and we notice that Will is the one that loses in the context of the little scuffle that they're having in their outburst. He is the one that is collected and stolen in Season 1. And, if you pay close enough attention, Vecna is in Season 1. He is there. I saw him. He's in the street. Rewatch Season 1. He's there. So, this, I heard that somebody just said, I just watched a video saying that, oh, Vecna wasn't, that this wasn't planned from the beginning, that Vecna was created out of the ether. I just rewatched Season 1, and I saw Vecna hiding in the shadows, approaching in the streets when Will was running away. So, I find that little interesting that that wasn't pointed out as, like, maybe it was an insert, as, like, maybe a potential, you know, even a potential criticism. Nope, completely left out, because of course it was. Because people sometimes don't pay attention to things, I guess. Or, you know, they could even mislead. Or completely be disingenuous or dishonest. We have a lot of bad actors here on YouTube. I don't know if you know this, but every person that I've seen put "this is woke," I can guarantee you that that is grifter slop right there. So yeah, let's just say what it is. Diversity. Because there is a gay character that comes out as gay. Surprise, surprise. But yeah, in the context of the 1980s, again, you know, in real life, coming out as gay back then, I've heard people unironically say, oh, just come out as gay, and all the other people just say, it's okay. This show does not take place in 2026. I don't know if the critics who are saying this are aware of the date this takes place in. Let me give you a little refresher in case people are forgetting. In the 1980s, coming out as gay could have gotten you killed back then. I would know, because in my high school in the 1990s, moving forward, I had read articles about, you know, a gay person getting killed out of a bar or something along those lines, for coming out or something along those lines. So, you know, it wasn't exactly an easy thing to do, coming out back then. I just want to give people some context to what the real world actually looks like back then, because I hear these criticisms and I'm going, oh, that seems like you're suddenly opting to forget when this takes place. It seems like you're being a little bit disingenuous with your criticism. It seems like you're being a little bit suddenly dishonest with your criticism. So, yes, coming out back then would have been extremely difficult. One of the most difficult things to probably do back then, in that era. So let's not pretend like this is some current day show. It takes place in the 1980s. And the writing, in that regard, is consistent, because another thing I've bizarrely heard, and after rewatching the entire show, I heard that, like, the season 5 sounds too modernized. I'm like, what the fuck show are you watching? And, you know, it's interesting. When I hear a claim like that, I'm like, please fucking provide evidence. Of course they never did. because there's nothing to point to, because it's an outright lie. Yeah, that's right, I'm calling that one an outright lie. You see, Stranger Things, as an overall package, it might be one of the best series to ever come out. And I might have a hotter take to come later on, but we'll see. Because I'm feeling a bit spicy, you see. But I think this show deserves the glaze. And I know that's often used as some sort of reflection of like, oh, you're just saying it to say it. No, I think that this really does come down to the writing. You see, the Duffer Brothers and the other writers of this show, because they weren't the only writers, but they are the primary writers and the producers equally, they clearly understand the writing basics. That, to me, comes across from Season 1 all the way to Season 5. They know how to make a setup, and they know how to pay it off effectively. They know cause and effect. They know the basics. This comes across in this show in spades. Every season has this. So to say that like any season has fallen off, I've heard bad iterations of, oh, this season is just bad, without any further exploration as to why it is bad. It is baffling to me that that is the case. But hey, there we are. So yes, in Season 1, they, of course, eventually get Will back. But not everything is as it seems. You see, Will came back with a little something extra. A little something extra, because he was taken to the ultimate evil, which is the whole Mind Flayer thing. So again, I would allude to the fact that people keep saying, like, I just heard a video just say that this wasn't planned, but yet, death of the author. It seems as if it is still planned, even if it wasn't. It comes across as everything seems to flow into another thing very naturally. So, yes, Will comes back, but he's not just himself. In fact, he seems to be possessed. And dare I say, the spy. This is, you know, the Mind Flayer / Vecna at this point already, if anything. Or at least the Mind Flayer at bare minimum. At any rate, more things ensue along Season 2, among them finding a way to rid themselves of this connection, and doing so successfully, or as successfully as they think they could have done. That being this outburst of, like, these dust particles that seem to draw itself back to the living entity that is the Mind Flayer. You see, I heard a criticism saying that, oh, they shouldn't have been able to kill the Mind Flayer so easily, and we'll get to that. Because I think that is also a bad criticism, believe it or not. And that the amount of time, that's also a bad criticism. Very bad. But we'll get to that as well. At any rate, we're still in sort of Season 2 and getting to Season 3 here, in terms of just sort of going over all the general gist of things that are, the events that are playing out. And all the while, you have all of these creches and, you know, Steve, and Nancy versus the whole Jonathan thing on the slightly older teenage vibe going on, and that whole love triangle, which seems to stem in opting to make it a very clear and obvious choice in, I want to say approximately season 3, I think is where they land that plane, or begin to land that plane, or it's like, you know, taking off to get ready to land in season 5. Setup and payoff and all that. But as I said, setup and payoff from season 1, it was referred all the way in season 1 that Will was not normal. His mom explicitly says this, that he is not normal. To Hopper, who asks, is he gay? And she does not answer that question, by the way. In reference to actually using the word, the F word, you know, faggot, that word, in case you are confused of the other F word, but I digress. In this essence, it is set up that there's something different about Will. At the very bare minimum, if you're at bare minimum paying attention, you should be able to at least be like, there's something a bit different about Will. And then in season 2, they explicitly say he drew a rainbow ship. Oh, but Will coming out in season 5 is when it got woke. Yeah, you keep telling yourself that, grifter slop people, as versus Babyface, Nerdrotic. I'm sure EFAP will make some bullshit up or find a way to wiggle out that one, but I'm making this video before because I heard they're gonna cover Stranger Things. I wanted to make my video before EFAP even probably poorly covers this show, just to get it out there that I think that they're gonna do a horrible job at it. I'm gonna make a prediction right here, right now, because that's how brave I am. You see, that's another setup to Will explicitly being gay. A rainbow ship, I mean, that's pretty on the nose, if you ask me. I mean, if that doesn't tip you off a rainbow anything, I don't know. Maybe you might have to look at a certain flag and go, I wonder why they would say a rainbow anything. And anyway, so yeah, setups and payoffs. And by the way, another criticism I heard of season 5, oh, why did Nancy shoot the guards? Oh, I don't know, maybe in season 1, she was the one who, when given a gun, was the one who was able to shoot a can. Maybe they set that up all the way in season 1, reinforces it in season 2 when, once again, she is given a gun, when other people are given more melee-based weapons, and continues to do so in said given season earlier, when she's the one who shoots the tracker onto the Demogorgon. So yeah, it's almost as if they set up that Nancy was an ace shot since season 1, and then carried that off to the payoff where she's the one shooting the military guys, because of course she would be. That follows through the setup of her being the one who shoots the can, and not Steve, Jonathan. So yeah, setup and payoff. This is really basic stuff, but I can't wait. And I've already heard the criticisms, but the military, they should be better. Whatever. It's gonna be laughable. And it already has been kind of laughable to see some of those come out. I've seen one of them, at least, say that, oh, Nancy shouldn't have been able to do that. It's like, oh, did you watch the show? Did you really watch? Were you paying attention to who was doing what Nancy in particular was doing? Or were you just sort of trying to say something different? I don't know. It really comes together, doesn't it? And falls apart on the critics that I have therefore seen thus far. But hey, we need to move on, alright? I believe it is Season 3 that introduces the mall, if I am not mistaken, because Season 4 is the intro to Vecna, or the proper introduction to Vecna proper. So Season 3 is the mall season, and I heard that this is the worst season, and I'm not entirely sure why again. I thought this season was solid. We are expanding on, how far the reach of these things are going, how far this, the world is of Stranger Things. We're expanding it to Russia. So yeah, we're going all the way over there. And as per usual, or as growing as it is, we have these new plot, the subplots that are sort of happening. And this is where we get the plot convergence. You see, the creators of the show know how to do plot convergence. They know how to converge their differing plots in ways that might seem like they are not going to affect each other, like Elle being in a pizza place, for a reason, only to see that she can piggyback, as she refers to it as, to Max, who has been through quite the ordeal herself within that season, and moving forward, that she is definitely a heavy target, as it were. But at any rate, so this leads to the entity in this more spider physical form, their first test fight against a sort of miniature version, I guess I would call it, of the Mind Flayer, a mini Mind Flayer of sorts. And of course, as per usual, they saved the day, but not without consequence at that time. Billy was an asshole, don't get it twisted, but he does redeem himself in the way that he can see himself fit to do within the circumstance. You see, every season from this moving forward, it clearly shows where they are taking inspiration from. Season 3 is a very clear inspiration from Body Snatchers. I think that's a pretty safe bet to land on if you don't know anything about Body Snatchers. But I digress in saying that I think that this season is just as strong as the first two. And its reference to it, grounds it in a different type of horror, of we as the audience know who is infected. At least two of them, of the people that we see infected, and maybe even potentially three at a certain point in juncture, but that's for later within that context. But of course there were more that were happening behind the doors, but that wasn't the main focus of the season, of like who was it, or of course our group eventually figures out who one of the infected people are, that being Billy, of course, and putting that to its resting place, freeing him, only for him to do said sacrifice, as I had mentioned, after his asshole sort of approach to most things, especially including his sister-in-law, that being Max in this case. So yeah, it is very clear that every season has had setups, payoffs, and consequence. This is something that they also excel at, I would argue, the Duffer Brothers and the other writers of this show. I heard that the criticisms that there were no consequences. Oh, but the character that they killed in season 5, it's an irrelevant character. I'm referring to 8, by the way. She is the second mind user within the context of Stranger Things. She's introduced as early as season 2, by the way, in case anyone's curious. Now, one could argue, if you're gonna make a criticisms, I suppose you could potentially cut this character. But I feel like that would undermine a bit of, in conjunction, L's or 11's sort of attitude of things. So that's the payoff of having a character like 8. Not necessarily someone you have to see too often, like this is a side character, we would call this, but it's an important side character, I would argue. She changes L11, her attitude entirely. Her vocabulary even changes within the context of meeting this character. And, it all still fits within the 1980s aesthetic, because again, I heard the criticism like, oh, it's modernized. Yeah, that's bullshit. That's a lie. That's just outright a lie. And again, that's a criticism I have heard, by the way. But outright a lie. At any rate. So this gets us to about season 4. After the mall incident, Billy's death, and so on, we jump into season 4. And this is the proper, quote-unquote, introduction to Vecna. Now, if anyone is somehow not picking up that Vecna is clearly inspired by Nightmare on Elm Street / Freddy Krueger, I think the show kind of shows its hand that that's the case by literally hiring Robert Englund, the actor that played Freddy Krueger, to be the prisoner that explains his scenario. Yeah, I think that one was a dead giveaway. That's the inspiration. I don't think that there's any stretch of the imagination that Vecna is a playoff of Nightmare on Elm Street. And the time, boy, that we spend with Vecna is a way more impressive antagonist in current juncture than Freddy, I would argue. Freddy is a bit of a goofball. I would not say the same of this character. Vecna is far from a goofball. revelations come about that he is indeed one. Again, this is a spoiler review, but that was revealed in season 4, so I think that's safe ground. At any rate, Vecna has this ability to curse, as they put it, the group, individuals. And once they are cursed, they enter the state, and he shows them their greatest fear through these nightmares. And with the nightmares getting stronger and stronger, their time eventually runs up. And when their time runs up, he can then proceed to kill them. And with each kill, he gets closer and closer to reaching his goal. He only needs 4 kills. And he gets, technically speaking, all 4 kills. Yes, we're talking about one of the best scenes I have seen in anything. The Max running up your hill scene that I'm pretty sure is like one of the most like dire situations I've again seen portrayed in a show. So this idea that the show has dropped off or there's any weaker seasons, again, I protest in saying season 4 has one of the strongest moments in all of Stranger Things within that moment. So much so that they felt so compelled that they did it again. And you know what? I'm gonna argue that one works. After all, they set it up and they pay it off. You see, that's the beauty of writing, is that it doesn't matter how long you take to do a thing. If everything within that time frame completes the thing, and it feels justified to do it that way, within its context, then that, ladies and gentlemen, is what we call expert writing. That is phenomenal writing, what we have on our hands here. So this idea that Stranger Things Season 5 is poorly written, has weaker episodes, has the woke moment, I'm putting all that to bed in my review right now, in saying that this is easily, again, one of the best payoffs to ever happen within its context of Stranger Things. But that's because they set it up. They set all of it up properly. And thus, the payoff is a relief of that thing, and is also simultaneously like a convergence on a subplot, if you want to call it that. So it's accomplishing more than one thing. That's the great beauty of these moments in Season 5, but we're still sort of wrapping up Season 4 in terms of just telling the overall story. So of course, just like in Season 3, our group splits apart into 3 different converging groups yet again. And each group has their role in serving to beat Vecna. Again, we have Elle, who's all the way elsewhere, piggybacking off of Max to get to Vecna. So she's all the way up in this pizza joint, using the water there to, again, as she refers to it as, piggybacking to Max. This moment is in conjuncture with Max being the bait in the first place, because she is in the house of Vecna, the actual house. All the while, in the upside-down version of the very same house, the teen group, as I'll call them, the older teen group of Nancy and the others, those lads and lasses, they're trying to get to Vecna in that world. So we have those all converging to do one thing. Again, converging these plots to all meet in the same place, and for all of it to feel like it's fitting, and it does. it payoffs in tremendous fashion in the defeat, or the so-called defeat, of Vecna in Season 4. And we see him get, flayed out that window. And, of course, who's shooting the gun? It's Nancy, huh? It's almost as if she's always the one doing the shooting. It's almost as if she is the one. Of course she is. I wouldn't have picked anyone else, in accordance to the setup. That's what they set up. So that's how I would have paid it off. I would have had it been Nancy if I were the writer of this episode. Of course I would. That would only follow from what was set up. Again, that's how setup and payoffs work. It has to come from something else. Something from before. At any rate, so they quote-unquote defeat Vecna. So now we are proper in Season 5. Now, I heard this other bizarre criticism like, oh, we don't need the military. What? What dumb motherfucker says that they don't need the military when the military has been chasing Elle all the way from the beginning of when Elle was a problem? Why would they suddenly not be there? That doesn't make any logical sense. This criticism, and I've heard this from the very same video I'm referring to, literally says, oh, the subplot of the military doesn't make any sense, or it shouldn't be there. What do you mean? They have to be there. That only follows through that they were the ones chasing Elle/11 at this point. So yeah, it only makes sense to have the military there. Their only goal is to capture Elle. And once she is gone, again, spoiler review, so I can safely say that you were warned previously, so I'm not sure why you'd be surprised that I would say that, but once she is gone, yeah, they have no reason to stay. They would just fuck off. That was their entire shtick. That's the whole reason they came to the place, oh god, I'm gonna forget the name of the town. But that's the whole reason they came there. To that location, to the town that they're in. I'm blanking on the name right now in my head. But still, the idea that they suddenly don't need the military, that is going to be the most ridiculous thing I have heard, or among them, because boy, oh boy, did I hear some ridiculous thing like the Nancy thing and the coming out thing. All of these things are apparently bad. So, no, first and foremost, let's address the first thing that happens. The military definitely has to be there. They're the human antagonist since previous seasons. So, of course, they're going to continue to be the human antagonist in the season finale that only follows from what was set up before. Anyway, so, of course, we have once again a new order of business, as Vecna's return has a little bit of a new twist to it. Now he's capturing even younger kids, the younger generation. Young Holly has grown up from this little baby in Season 1 to a small girl in Season 5. And boy, does Holly go through quite the ordeal herself. It's like poetry, it rhymes, you see, but now we're following her, not unlike Will in Season 1. We only find Will in the end of Season 1, and we kind of get drip-fed bits of information of how he survived throughout the series, by the way. And it is here in Season 5, we're just following Holly at this point, because she is among the 12 children, so now it is upgraded or downgraded, I guess in this case for Vecna, from 4 all the way to 12 kids that he wants to collect for the 12-leg spire thing that he has on his planet that is not the Upside Down, which is among the big reveals in season 5, which a lot of people had already pre-predicted that one anyway. So I guess some people pay attention, so there's that at the very most. So yes, we do spend a deal of time with Molly, but of course she is now a fully recognized character on top of being a McMuffin. But she's not simply a McMuffin, she's a character too. And that's what makes her stand out in season 5. She's just not utilized as a sole McMuffin, as it were. They realize, that just like how Will was when he was young, that, Vecna did, that he can jack all 12 of these kids, and that would increase power by 12%, literally and figuratively. So, yes, that is the new plan, the new setup, and boy, does he get awfully close, because he gets all 12. Spoiler alert, he does it again. Despite the criticisms of, oh, his plan is stupid, he manages to get really fucking close to diverging the 2 planets, by the way. The thing that he set out to do, he gets really close to meeting his pure objective in this matter. But wait, I hear the criticisms, but they didn't have any defenses. It would appear that the defenses were very clearly cut off or, killed off in previous seasons. Whether that be due to, in season 4, the bat things. I don't remember what the creatures are called. I don't know if they were given a name, actually. But they are killed off once that entity is dealt with. Again, them being a hive mind, it does that to them. So they were rendered useless way before, so they wouldn't be guards that wouldn't follow from what was already set up. They set up that they were already dead, and that all the other Demogorgons were already dead, or the vast chunk of them that were coming about. They were already dead by the time that they got to the final area. So yeah, this idea, like, oh, he should have had, it's like, what? What are you criticizing? It's like, were you paying attention to what was coming before? Seriously? Anyway, so yes, we have that going on. And of course, we have the return of Will as, this character that has been used and abused and all of the rest. But there's one last thing. We had spent all this time with the setup of him being gay, but that's not before the Nancy thing, so the Nancy thing first. So they're driving up to get to the military base to get to the Inside Out, and they have guards up in the post, and we have Nancy being the one who shoots them, because of course she would be, because she has, among the group that is there, the biggest and highest experience. So of course she would be the gunning gal, because that's what was set up. Again, based on how the party was split, and I'm using the Dungeons and Dragons terms at this point, based on how the party was literally split up, once more, I would have also chosen Nancy. Surprise, surprise. Of course I would have. It's not like Lucas was there. He wasn't. He wasn't in that group. If Lucas was there, and if he knew how to shoot a gun, I mean, he knows how to do a slingshot, that's for sure. But a gun? Who's to say? Again, we don't get that kind of setup, so... If it was Lucas, maybe he would have gotten shot. But it was Nancy. It was set up, shoot her gun, and get that shot in one shot Nancy. At the beginning of Season 1 Nancy. So, forgive me for paying respect to setup and payoff. But that is what that looks like. You take what you have been given, and you pay it off in giving the role to the correct character. And in this role, you give it to Nancy, because of course you would. As a writer, if it had been someone else who was an ace shot, you would give it to that character, but it wasn't given, that setup wasn't given to any other character with the exception of Lucas, but he's with another group. And again, he wasn't an expert with guns necessarily, the slingshot rather, as I had just mentioned, but that is, that might have been a bit of a learning curve, is to serve my point. Again. At any rate, so of course Nancy gets it done, because of course she was going to. So they get into the Inside Out, as per usual, and, the military are trying their best to defend this position, and it gets attacked by Vecna, who makes his way out early, at some point in this season, and again, what I would argue is another one of the best moments of Stranger Things is the whole military shootout that happens when Vecna comes out of that, out from the Inside Out, when the reveal of the return of 8 is here. So that's what Hopper and Elle end up discovering, is that they were holding 8 this entire time from the last point we had seen her, which was in either season, I think it was season 3, where she dropped off, because I don't recall her in season 4. So it's only been one season where she's not present. But I digress. So they have her return here. So she returns as that character reveal. And so, they utilize all of this stuff with Vecna later on, with her and all that stuff, but we'll get to that in a bit. But first, the rest of the group reconvenes at a point. They've been going in and out and all this other stuff, and they're getting ready. They have exposited, where our current situation is, via planning. That's how they have done it in the previous season, in the previous season, in the previous season, and in season 1. The planning phase is the exposition phase, all wrapped up into one. That has been consistently written that way since season 1, if I'm remembering everything correctly. But maybe it was introduced at season 3, if we're being, I guess, charitable to the critics, I guess. I don't know, but at any rate. So Will has been, pulled into this defeat, as it were, after, he has been tossed around but left alive, as Vecna would have it no other way, because he was the spy after all. A freed spy at this juncture, but a spy nonetheless. So of course Vecna said one last time, so he was gonna live, he was gonna keep Will around until that very last moment, and then let him go, likely. And, of course, with that, he's not the only one, because much like how he very much resisted every step of the way, we have, in conjunction with him, little Holly, who gets given her D&D role within this season. Holly the Heroic. And boy, as I had already mentioned, she went through her own ordeal throughout this entire season. Which is all set up, by the way, to the redux of the run scene. Because that, ladies and gentlemen, is what we call the payoff of all that stuff that we're seeing her go through, you see. But we're going to talk about the coming out scene. Oh boy. So, yes, Will comes out of the closet. And I've heard the critics say, this goes on for far too long. He keeps yapping away. They have time. It's the planning phase the night before, or the night, later on in the night. They have time. So time isn't the problem. Let's cut that shit out right now. They have time. It's clearly daytime, and what's happening, you see, is going to happen at nighttime. That's established in the episode that we're dealing with here. That is the amount of space and time we literally have. So we have time, okay? So time can't be the excuse. I'm crossing that one off your critique list. I'm cutting that shit off immediately. They have time, alright? Will has the time to do this. The second criticism I've heard of this scene is, well, why would he admit this in front of pretty much everyone? First and foremost, and most importantly, that was his choice to do it that way. To come out in that way. That was his choice to do it that way. And I think that makes it even stronger. Not weaker writing, stronger. Remember, this is the 1980s. I said that as much as way long ago in this video. This is a time when coming out, again, as I have already mentioned, could very easily get you killed. That is what that time was like. In real life. And art imitates reality. So coming out in this way takes the most amount of bravery at this junction of time. In this day and age of the 1980s, not 2026. That might have, or 2025, I guess, technically speaking. That might have been when the show released, but that's not when the show was dated in terms of in-canon lore. So that can't be the excuse. You can't just say, oh, he should just come out. It can't be that simple. It cannot. It literally cannot. If you're conjunctioning that with real life, you would realize how stupid you sound the second you say that. You're being dishonest. You're being dishonest of when this comes out, in terms of the canon lore. So that is, again, so we can whack off the amount of time. Will has the time. 2, it was his choice to tell everybody, as I just said, which again makes it stronger, not weaker. Now, in conjunction with that, Will believed, because he was shown through Vecna, that in doing this, as he literally claims in the scene, that he would be pushed away by the others, that they would feel, not only, they would feel sorry for them, is the way he puts it. Sorry for him. Not that they would hate him, that they would feel sorry for him. And that has been happening since season 1. His mom, has been proof of that very essence consistently. Her worry has been consistent. So that, of course, being the most important character to tell. But the rest was his additional choice. But of course, the main friend group also likely should have been there. Because of course they would be. But the add-ons, that's what puts it over the edge. That's the real test. That's the real bravery. If it was just his closest friends, sure, there's an amount of bravery, but it loses its actual power, its full potential. You're robbing the full writing potential. And for what? To criticize the time? The thing that in the show tells you that they have plenty of right now, within the scene that it's happening in. It's daytime. The events are happening at nighttime. They have the time. Will has the time. And he has the choice to tell who he wants to tell. He wants to tell literally everyone who is in that room. That was his choice. That was his power to take. And I think that this scene was also acted without the slightest hint of cringe. I've heard that this scene is cringe. Cringe is just as vague as the word woke, by the way, at this point in juncture. I don't know what cringe means at this point. I would love an actual example. And he roundabouts his way to saying, without saying, I'm gay. Because, of course, that would be the stance at that time. The very same thing happened with the character that inspired him to do this in the first place. And God, I do remember, I wish I remember her name off the top of my head, but I did not write notes for this. I remember Nancy, but, because she definitely stands out in that season. In a good way. But yeah, those very same people, by the way, they did not. They said, oh, the lesbian scene, that one was fine. The one with the truth serum being the way she reveals her sexuality. That one was apparently fine. But Will coming out, a guy coming out, oh, that's an issue. Because of the time. Even though it was established he has time, based on what we can see in the sky in the environment outside if you're a simple observer. So he has the time, as I've now reiterated 3 times, just so to make that crystal clear. And now that it's a guy, there's suddenly an issue. It's suddenly cringe, without any further explanation of why it's cringe. What makes it cringe? Is it because he kind of goes on a little bit, like he's nervous? Like, this is like a big deal? As if, as I've already established, again, within the context of real life, like, boy, like, I would, if I were in Will's shoes, let's put it this way, the very last things, I'd be going all the way roundabouts. Let's put it that way. Of course I would. Who wouldn't? In that time frame. It wasn't a simple thing back then. So, both characters, in their respective ways, do it in a more roundabout sort of way. Now, yes, this does confirm that in the season finale, that, based on the imagery that we see, that he eventually meets somebody else. This is alluded to via these little flash forwards, as I'll call them, of things to come in the future for them as respect of each character, that he meets somebody else. And this might upset some people on the other side of the fence, the ones that were rooting for the gay ship in the first place, those individuals. And here's what I'll say about that, right? Obviously, this was a coming out story from season 1 up to this point, at least in terms of what we were given outright in terms of the writing. It doesn't matter if it was planned or not, that's irrelevant already. What's in the writing is that this was a coming out story from the get-go. That's in the writing. That was set in stone, baby. So now all there is, again, is to pay it off. So that draws out to the coming out story. That is technically the main conclusion, as it were. Outside of the outside conclusion, as I'll put it. That is the main conclusion. That is the end of his story. As vital as he ends up being in that final battle, despite all that. That is his moment. So, this idea that this scene should have been shortened is absolutely ludicrous. He had the time. The idea that this was in any form cringe has no basis in anything other than just vibes, I guess, because from what I was hearing, there is no clear evidence as to what was cringe, other than just saying it was cringe. Again, when you criticize something, when you say something is bad, your job as a critic should be to say, why is it bad? Why is it cringe? Expands from that very same principle. So, that's what I'm doing when I'm saying things are good, is I'm saying that and I'm explaining why it's good. I'm explaining why through the setups and payoffs. That's how I'm explaining that it's good. I'm using that catalyst for it. And so, before our final battle, that is the final thing, among the final things that happens before the final episode. Which brings us, I think, neatly into the final episode. So they have their plan, is to wait until the other side, the other planet, as they call it, the Abyss, gets close enough for them to jump right up to it from the tower, that being one of our groups. Of course, we once again split the party. Because of course we did it again. So we have L and 8, and Hopper. That's one group, and I believe just above them is as he's referred to in the show, at least, as Fat Santa or Santa something. So it's those four in the facility, where things originated from. They're in there. They pull from her position Max. So they piggyback her into their memory, or whatever, however that functions. Because she was already, giving into that power set herself. But as far as someone else needing to die, I heard that 8 was going to be a traitor. She ends up actually dying, and I think, I think that you can critique this. I think that that's fair. I think that you could have set her up a little bit more. You know, and maybe something between season 3 and 4, because that's when she vanishes, might be in order for her. Who's to say? But they probably, the critics are already given up on her by the time she was already introduced. That which was already given based on what I've seen. I thought her character was much more of a side character when she was at least introduced. Way more of a secondary character in terms of like importance. Again, the way she affects Elle, I do think that feels like it fits, again, as I had already mentioned. So I think her role is justified enough, at least in terms of that section. In terms of her send-off, as it were, I do think they could have done a little bit more for us to get there. I wouldn't mind seeing a spin-off of her, what she had gotten up to. I don't think I would personally mind at all. Get some stuff from before. Get the very detailed explanation fed as how she escaped. Her life story, how she got entangled with their group. She seems very more heist, oriented, and she poses a very different ideology to Hopper's, which again, that's why I feel she's, despite being a secondary character, still an important character. To give Elle someone who's, technically on her side, even at the end, she's not a spy, as some people have almost alluded to. That did not pan out at all. She just had a different, conclusion about where things needed to end, as she puts it. She says that they both need to be on that side, and that's sort of what 11 chooses to do, as it were. Which brings us to that whole maybe conclusion, but we'll get there in just a sec. But, it reaches the tipping point when they can cross over to the Abyss, our other group, which is a large chunk of the group, led by, you guessed it, Nancy with a gun, because of course she ends up being the one who ends up being bait, by the way, which, hats off to her, man. Whew. Because, spoiler alert, if I were writing it, I also would have picked her to do the exact same thing. That just seems like it follows from everything else, as it typically did. So yeah. So they're dealing with that. Holly and the other kids, among them, the only other sort of semi-important side character among the kids is Fat Derek, or Dipshit Derek as they refer to him as. So they free them eventually, and they do this elaborate scheme, as it were, the group. So we have Elle approaching him, and 8 is elsewhere, and she creates an illusion. The kids are on one side of the illusion, and he is on the other. So the kids, they seem invisible, and this was already set up that's her power set is to create illusions. That's what her setup was. So now, this is the payoff. So now the kids get to see what Vecna truly is. Holly and Dipshit over there, dipshit Derek, they were the ones, the only two of the among the 12 that were the freest from them. The rest fell in line, as it were, into Vecna's will. They caved in, and they believed all of his words, because he's a deceiver as well. So now, the deceiver is being deceived. Setup and payoff, even in that regard alone. So now, Elle is on that side, getting him to reveal that he is indeed the monster that he kept saying that, the monsters are out there, and he even tries to claim that Max is among them, which is why the kids initially doubt when Max arrives. So they get into believing that Max is, this, monster, as he puts it. But now she has proof, as she puts it, and again, that plan comes into fruition. So now all the kids can see. And now that they have all seen, they can break free of that will that has held them there. And now, Holly leads them. Among the kids, she is the leader of that group. Which follows, because she has been through the ordeal, so now she's leading that ordeal away. So they go to this cave that has held this memory, the memory that Vecna was too afraid to go in for this whole time. This was set up earlier. He was chasing Max, and she had reached this cave, and we see that he stops at it. He does not encroach on the cave. So he stops at the base of the cave before its full entrance. So she finds her safe space there, in terms of where to hide out. And now that comes to pay off, as the kids are now in there, so they are temporarily safe. So now, Vecna, in order to get his shit back on track, he needs to recapture the kids. He needs to get back in that cave regardless, because the cave only leads outward from his position. So he has to walk in there and deal with the shit that has been dealt to him. That being that there was this briefcase that we saw in this guy that was holding it earlier, and we weren't sure of what it held the first time we saw it. This is, when we first see Max and Molly run through here the first time, we see the briefcase, we just don't see what's in it. What is in it seems to be this rock with these etched out markings on it. This, through visual storytelling alone, enters into young Vecna and connects him to the Mind Flayer. The Mind Flayer's voice reaches out through this object to him. That's the visual storytelling. So we don't actually need anything else other than that, which I heard criticisms about, what is this rock? Or what, all this stuff about the rock. It's like, that's all we need. That's all we need, is that is a connection. That's all we need, seriously. Like, you can leave it at that. That's enough. So that is our base connection to the Mind Flayer. And so it embedded himself inside Vecna, the kid. So it is still inside Vecna now, obviously. That was his choice to make, and now he is embedded in that choice, as he literally puts later on, when Will, in his last attempt, tries to reach out, saying that, all of his evil deeds, they were not set out by him, but by the Mind Flayer. That this was this greater evil that made this lesser of evil among Vecna, who made that choice, as he puts it, to, take that rock and absorb it. And so, in this moment, we have our conclusion in which Vecna reaches. He says that, and he doubles down on his original, ideology, that this world, the Earth, all of these people, all of their suffering, it all needs to end in the way that it currently functions. That is his entire thing from the moment he is set up in Season 4. And his first appearance in Season 1, if you really want to be super observant as I was in rewatching Season 1, you can see him again in that street. So yes, setup and payoff. He doubles down on his ideology that his path is the correct path to take. And so Will must fight too. That was his last-ditch effort to just talk, but just talk has failed. Diplomacy has failed. His role in the Dungeons and Dragons, if we were to, call back to that, all the way in Season 1, Episode 1, when they were playing Dungeons and Dragons, he rolled, and he probably rolled a natural 1. Who knows? In terms of, what the DC would have been if we're really using our Dungeons and Dragons terms, all of them. Who knows what the DC was? But he obviously failed. So he failed. So he had to fight. But it wasn't just his fight. And in coming out, Vecna, who had utilized that secret from before, that secret that held the weight of death before on its weight based on our time frame, the 1980s, that weight no longer holds Will down. That weight is gone. Vecna cannot use it to strangle Will anymore. And he's already gone from, in terms of, being connected in that way to the hive mind. That's the reason that he is spared when all the other things die, because he wasn't connected in that way to the hive. He only shared as much as power set in terms of the hive, as we see in one of the most badass scenes in the entire show. Him stopping the 3 demigorgons from taking out 3 of his friends in 3 different separate locations, because he could see and pull through the demigorgons and stop them in their tracks and kill them the way very much Vecna did to all of his victims. So a little bit of redemption in that way, or a little bit of payback in the same vein, as it were, from our heroes to the villains. Fighting fire with much needed fire at this point, because the villains are not backing down. Vecna is not backing down in his ways. So he must be stopped in the only other way that is left, and that is indeed killing him. And of course we have the larger entity of the Mind Flayer, who is now a physical entity. So it can now be hurt as much as the creature in Season 3 can be hurt. As much as the creature in Season 4, Vecna, can be hurt. And much as the same in Season 2 and in Season 1. These creatures now having a physical form, they can be hurt. That has been set up and paid off. The rules have been consistent, so I don't want to hear anything about inconsistent rules, alright? I've not heard that criticism yet. Not directly, at least. I think it was at least implied before. But I'm making sure I'm covering my bases here and saying that this utterly pays off in that regard. So Will no longer has that weakness. Elle dives into the creature, and where the other body of Vecna, the true body of Vecna, is stored. It has been stored for quite some time. Of course, he had the one that the body that could chase the kids, but he had his stopping point, that wall, that cave for the memories. That was his limit for a time before he had to relive, and as I already mentioned that a little bit. So Elle enters inside, and this is where all the kids currently are too, in this fight sequence that happens between Elle and Vecna directly. So those two are fighting. Meanwhile, Nancy starts off her distracting the actual Mind Flayer on the outside, the big creature, and all the others on the top of the hill, because they move their fight to this crevice that has like this intersection where Nancy gets a little stuck there, very much so, and she needs to get defended by, after firing and being said bait by the others. And so they are doing their due diligence in being that service of fighting back. And within the fight, with everything still being connected in this regard from the Mind Flayer to Vecna, at least in this, when the Mind Flayer gets hurt, so does Vecna, and vice versa. And so, that connection severs, as I already mentioned, through Will. That connection is now severed at this point. Will has been freed. He has freed himself from that shackle, that last remaining shackle, as it were. That last remaining, secret. That thing that held him down. And so, we have Elle on the inside battling, and it's a bit of a back and forth. We have the others on the outside weakening Vecna, which allows Elle the opportunity to gain the upper hand. And the final stretch in combination, it's not just Will alone, it's everybody working together, which is, the party finally coming together to do what they have always done in every previous season, or at least from season 3 moving forward, to stopping the bigger entities at the very most. To do that way. To have everybody have a function. Everyone in the party using their best capabilities and putting it out there. And that means Will using the abilities that he still has. They didn't drop just because the severs dropped. That carried over. That's the thing that carried over, the abilities. That's the neat part. They're innate within him from the moment Vecna encroached. They did not leave him because they were still innate, as it were in D&D. So, he gets to keep that, and he utilizes it, in conjunction with Elle, once Will, from a safer position, stops Vecna. Elle takes the upper opportunity. He's like in the mid-air, and he's like being pushed against this sharp point that can kill him. So they're pushing him against it together now at this point, from inside and out. And the creature is being, jacked from the bottom from Steve Harrington and Dustin. He's being pelted on by the top by Lucas and the others. Nancy is in the cavern, as I mentioned. So everyone's doing their bits. And so, with their combined effort, they're able to drive Vecna into that. And through it, the creature falls. The creature falls, but Vecna is still alive. but barely hanging on. So the creature is barely hanging on. Its presence is still there. Its physical presence is still there, though pretty much down for the count, as it were. Down to its last hit points. And so, to carry us home, it is none other than the mom. Will's mom. Who gets it done. With an axe. And, you know, Vecna is positioned in such a way that his head is just so conveniently, you know, placed to be hacked in such a way. And all the remaining characters, you know, come about. Will is able to now encroach since he, you know, he's no longer in threat of direct, you know, positioning. So he's able, everybody's able to be there. All the kids are freed at this juncture as well. Everyone who is within that vicinity is watching on. And by God, the ultimate setup and payoff happens here. One of them, among them. That being, we see as Will's mom is hacking away. With each hack, we cut to each character's perspective and the things that Vecna has done to each of them directly is, in essence, a payoff that is so beautiful. It is just beautiful. I don't think I have any other word for it other than that. And quite frankly, this battle is as long as it needed to be. I don't think... Here's the thing, you know, about fight scenes, is that it's a tough call. You see, you don't want two characters just fighting. That's a given. And, you know, especially in a story-driven story, that being, you want characters first. So there has to be a balance between the two things, fighting and character work. So I think the allotted time given to that fight, the entire fight, not just, you know, sort of the takedown kind of happens in a similar time frame, but point being is that I think it was just enough time. It wasn't too long, and it wasn't too short either. It was just right. And that's a hard thing to pinpoint in terms of criticism or even praise for that matter. It is really hard to really find that nice roundabout way of putting every puzzle piece into place. But I think they did it fairly well. They gave every character a thing to do. They showed off what every character could do. They showed off the potential harm the creature could do. It almost like squishes, you know, some of them at certain different junctures. It almost eats Nancy, just as a few examples. But in the end, it's a fight as long as it needed to be. And at least in this fight, you know, 8's already quote-unquote dead. You know, there's the whole, which ending is the correct ending bit, which again we'll get to. But in this sense, we get, again, the reflection of each character and all the stuff they've been through. And Will's mom, Joyce, gets the hits, and so those moments all hit and hit and hit and hit, and then the head, once every memory has been shared, the head comes clean off, and thus properly ends Vecna once and for all. You have officially killed him. So with him goes the Mind Flayer, because those are the only two things left in terms of what's left in here, as far as right now anyway. You know, apparently there's already new Stranger Things stuff in development, and this animation thing I saw at some point that, I don't know, that's a wait and see sort of thing, I guess, but, well, again, just wait and see on that, but at any rate, in terms of what's here, I think it is sufficient. It is sufficient in execution, it is sufficient in the time, it is sufficient in every way it needs to be. And no, I am not of the simple mind that some character needed to die here. That is an absolutely ludicrous idea, that a character needs to die. That is stupid. That is just stupid. No. No character needs to die. That's not how that works. That's not a criticism. That's not anything. That is some weird desire, honestly, that comes from this idea that if a character had died, I can guarantee you, if it had been any number of the important characters, which all of them were at that juncture, that there would have been a massive, uproar about that very death. So we have to walk that tightrope. You see, I referred to the Negan effect. I'm coining this term now, here and now, if I haven't already. I call this the Negan effect. That being Glenn's death in The Walking Dead. This is a long time coming, if I haven't coined this term right yet. So here in the Negan effect, we have a character that is well beloved in Glenn. He's, far surpassed expectations of a character. We have come to love and grow, and he fell in love, and he's a character that everyone was a fan favorite of. And in the comic, he was killed. And people were speculating if they were going to keep to that or deviate. It was a big choice. They didn't just kill Glenn, but they did. They killed another character, Abraham, I believe it was, if I remember Walking Dead. It's been a while. But they did hold true to killing Glenn in the television show. Now, there were people who were explicitly just watching the television show, and fair enough. And those people were outraged that Glenn died. They were outraged. People literally stopped watching the show mid-show, and that was the downfall of The Walking Dead, despite that being, at least in my conclusion and objectively speaking, one of the best horror deaths of all time. That one is in the top 3. There is no question. That is in the top 3 of horror deaths of all time. That is in the top 3. There is no argument to be had in that. That death is horrific. And it happened to a beloved character, which makes it even more horrific. That's why it reaches that threshold. And because that character was so beloved, people stopped watching. And I would have guaranteed if Stranger Things were to have done that and not have anything future planned, which apparently they do, people would stop watching Stranger Things in droves. Let me repeat that word, droves. Walking Dead fell apart based on one of the most iconic deaths of all time. Why is a death needed if that is the outcome that is so predictable in real life? That is stupid to ask any creator to do. That is a gamble that you are going to lose as a writer. That is the risk you have to take as a writer, and it is becoming increasingly difficult to kill off characters, it would seem, at least from the Walking Dead's perspective. But doing the opposite, now all of a sudden it's the opposite. Now people need to die. What? When did we flip? I'm sorry, when did this happen? I'm a little bit confused in our timelines here of where we have on our standards. Needs to die. That's the word that is throwing me off the most. Need. This need. What are you talking about, my people? Criticizing this moment of deaths and non-deaths alike. So I bid that, and I say, well, the characters that survived, survived, and the characters that died, died. 8 died, and presumably, quote-unquote, 11 died. And that is the story we are presented with, at least, up until the epilogue, and then we are given some additional, quote-unquote, hopeful and alternative, story stuff going on, but we'll get, again, getting to that. Right now, in fact. So they get out of the abyss, and they blow up the Inside Out on their way out. And in the process of blowing it up, 11 stays on the Inside Out portion, so she's consumed by all intents and purposes from what we see as the audience as her sacrificing herself. And everyone, including the military, who that was their sole objective, was capturing her, so once she's gone, they have no reason to stick around. So they fuck off, because of course they would. Their whole mission is gone. No need to stick around. That, again, I heard criticisms like, oh, they need to question the people. Like, why? What would they gain from that? They would all get the same story. The girl clearly died. They saw it. The military were there. They were also there. They saw her, as far as they could see with their eyeballs, her stay on that side of the wall in accordance to what they saw. So they would have no reason to stay. That makes no logical sense. From their perspective, that makes no logical sense to stay. Their mission was gone. Again, basic. Really just think these things through before you say something really stupid like, oh, the military, whatever. They needed to stick around or some dumb shit. It's like, what? What? What do you mean? Pay attention to what their perspective would be. They have nothing left to do there, as far as they're concerned. The whole reason they infiltrated the town again was to get L11. That was their whole goal. And so, now that they have no goal, they fuck off, and it's graduation day for our main crew. The original kids. Of course, the older teens are getting jobs and, getting ready to move out. So that's their step forward. So we get that first, by the way. We get them, the teens getting ready to become adults. They're transitioning into adulthood. They're getting jobs. They're moving on. And they're fucking off. Because they have had enough. And they say that, they'll meet. So it would seem. And everything in this context, in this moment, it's beautiful. It's well written. It's just a nice little send-off to give our characters, as in D&D tradition, every character gets their finale. That's it's become a Dungeons and Dragons tradition. As someone who has been a dungeon master, I gave my players the freedom to do whatever they pleased within the context of my campaign, and they all had reasonable endings. Because it was their endings. They chose them for themselves. I let them. That was my choice as the DM. But I digress in focusing back on the show. And speaking of Dungeons and Dragons, we cut back to our secondary group. We cut to our main characters, the younger crew, who are, finishing up. They're in the trenches of a campaign sometime later from the end of the incident. I forget what the time frame said in the thing above. I didn't write it down. But some time passes, obviously. And thus, they are reaching their campaign, which is mirroring what they just experienced. And so, you know, the group is getting upset because one of them, like, rolls poorly or something, and they're trying to cast spells, and it's not working, and all of this stuff, and it seems to be lining up with, again, the events that just transpired. So this is, you know, I think this is, like, doubling up for the fans who were crafting the theory that this was all a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. I think this was not just meant to satisfy their little, you know, their little theory, but to be like, yeah, they still kept up with it despite all of the things that happened. If it wasn't D&D, if it wasn't all Dungeons and Dragons, so you can interpret it either way. And I think that's a really good way of putting it. That strengthens the writing. It makes it better, not worse. Again, opening up the avenues to how you can read this entire series grows, not shrinks. So, yes. They all call upon the hero, L. They're referring to L when they're referring to, I believe it's like a wizard that they call upon in the Dungeons and Dragons finale that they are doing in this little moment. And so with this call upon, it is successful, but it is successful in matching the very energy that 11 just did. And it's an emotional scene, just as the previous one was. The characters are literally emotional, and it's very beautiful on top of that, just in terms of writing. So again, this idea that the writing in Season 5 is bad, whew! Talking about an emotional roller coaster, those last, like what, I want to say, it goes on for a bit. I mean, the segment with the teens goes on for a bit. That's like 10 minutes or something, that they're just like shooting the shit of what they're gonna do. And this is like another 10 minutes or something along those lines of this little session that is ending. And Will goes on and, you know, when they reach that conclusion, and it is Max who points out, man, a happy ending, that seems a little bit ridiculous. And, you know, Will goes into detail after hearing her say that, and it reinforces, and it shows the little forward scenes, as it were, of, you know, Lucas and Max continuing to hang out. As I mentioning Will moving on and finally finding someone as implied. And the other player was Dustin, who went on to, you know, have these little side adventures and continue his research and whatnot. And having him give the speech that he did to give out tribute to his ally in arms who had fell in Season 4. Oh man, his name is escaping me right now. But yes. Again, I should have wrote that down, but I digress in saying that, you know, that was the last act of defiance, and also a form of setup and payoff once more again. And as the tearful, you know, goodbyes of this session, they close their character sheets and they put them on the shelf there, and they head on up. And then we see the next beautiful thing about Dungeons and Dragons. We see Holly come down with her group, and she's becoming a dungeon master in herself. And, you know, I don't know why I keep wanting to saying Lucas, not Will, but, why am I not remembering the other, who he had a crush on, his name, Oh man, I am drawing a blank right now. The other main character for now. I'll just put it that way for now. Him. He's looking down at the group, the new group, and you know, there's a bit of a forlorn but small smile. There's like a shifting in tones and the look that he kind of gives as he makes his final departure as the closed doors. And that of the closing of that door is the end of Stranger Things as they are prepping to play in Holly's group. And that was Stranger Things in its entirety. All 5 seasons. So yeah, while I should have written out a better script, I did not have time to script in terms of like, you know, the amount of things I had to go over. I wrote some things down, but they were for earlier seasons, and I just kind of ran off on season 5 in terms of like, because I thought it was semi-fresh, at least in terms of viewing timeline. But in terms of an entire series, from start to finish, talk about consistent writing from beginning to end. So I'm really tired of hearing this whole, oh, the later seasons, the writing got worse and worse. It's like, no. The writing was consistent, you're just not paying attention. You are so not paying attention, in fact, because epic and beautiful payoffs seem to be fairly consistent in the writing of this show. Like, consistently so. Impressively so. Dare I say, if I may make a daring, bold claim, I think this is in lines of something that can be and rival of The Lord of the Rings. I think it's that good. Dare I suggest, it might be better. It might just be better. Maybe that's my hot take. Maybe I'm gonna say Stranger Things is better than Lord of the Rings. So I'll say it. I think Stranger Things is better than Lord of the Rings. I dare to say it. I dare to put that out there on the internet. That's my hot take on Stranger Things. That's how hot I think this show is. And you know, despite a video I saw of the creators being like, oh, we didn't understand Dungeons and Dragons, boy, did this end up being a love letter to Dungeons and Dragons in the end. Despite that. Death of the author. They might have never intended the Dungeons and Dragons to be a big thing in this, but boy howdy, did the writing say otherwise. Did it ever say otherwise, especially in that ending? That ending that paid tribute not only to the fan theories of it being an entire, you know, D&D thing, the entire series literally being a Dungeons and Dragons, you know, session played out. Though that wouldn't pan out entirely, at least from the way I see it. I mean, the timeline just doesn't add up. I mean, Max is playing in that session 5. Or that final session, I should call it. They didn't meet Max until, you know, a later season, so what happened in unless, you know, they claim to have ended a campaign in season 1. You know, that's their bit in season 1. Or no, Will was taken or whatever. So it was actually in season 2, I think they end that particular season, or, you know, that battle. But in terms of it all being a Dungeons and Dragons thing, that really wouldn't explain Molly. Like, they would have had to approach her, convince her at some point between, seasons 4 and 5, I guess, off screen to do so, if that theory was to hold any weight. Any weight at all. But again, that's calling to something that would happen off screen. That's not the type of reviewer I am. I'm, strictly telling you of what happens on screen. And what I've seen on screen and in writing are excellent setups and payoffs, excellent causes and effects, excellent pinpoints of times to execute said things, how to tie threads, how to tie subplots back together to converge into one plot. This is something I think that the Duffer Brothers and their fellow writers have mastered. I'm going to say that word again, mastered. Because I have not seen a single review detach that in any attempt so far. And I highly doubt that any future video beyond mine will do it, quite frankly. I don't think I'll find the proof that will debunk that claim. I don't think it can happen, quite frankly. I'll wait. I'll wait with bated breath, as it were. And I know when a show is good. When the thing I typically say of a show is, man, as someone who was growing up, I always wanted to be an actor. Ever since I was a kid. Was in the school plays, was the awkward kid, all that stuff. I was the oddball. I was the freak. I am the outcast, as it were. Always was, right? Always will be. Currently am. Here's the thing. I would have killed, metaphorically, of course, to be on Stranger Things. Absolutely. I wish I could have been in the locations and, know the in-peoples of how to get in on a thing such as Stranger Things. To be a part of something that excellent. And that to be an outing show. Oh my god. And no, just in terms of performance, not coming out. In case that was unclear. But hey, if they wrote me as a coming out character, then I'll do it. I've done it before. In terms of YouTube, so I wouldn't be opposed to doing it again in the acting. But I digress in saying I would have been so honored to be a part of something this epic, this well written. It would have been an honor to be a part of something this big, even if it was just for a season. Even if I were to be a character that would have been killed off, just to be a character in something this well written, I would have loved to have had the opportunity. But people like me, they don't get opportunities like that. I'm too small, I'm too insignificant, I only have 200 subscribers, and I live in a state where nothing gets shot in terms of, people recording for movies and TV shows. Nothing happens in my home state. I live in that boring town, in terms of the living metaphor coming to life. I live in that small town, metaphorically and literally, but it's an entire state, unfortunately. It's bigger, but just as boring. And it remains just as boring. So yeah, I have the misfortune of just having this dream that is so far out of reach, just to be an actor, a voice actor, any of these two things. This thing that I've wanted to be since my youth. And in being a YouTuber, and a failed one at that, with only 200 subscribers to my name, all I can really say is, damn, how I can only keep wishing. How I can only keep running up that hill into insanity and beyond, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. To have someone else reach out their hand to me, and for me to take it and get such an opportunity, that would be the day I'd probably unironically break down and cry again, because that to me would be something utterly special, to get that chance to do something of that great of significance. But that does indeed close off this video. This love letter to Dungeons and Dragons, as I will subtitle this video, because it is a love letter to Dungeons and Dragons at the end of the day. It really shined a light that has been an ever-growing light since, it's been a bit now, but, there was a time, again, when Dungeons and Dragons was, as I already mentioned, considered demonic, as demonstrated in the show and again in real life. The Satanic Panic carried over to Dungeons and Dragons, if you were not connecting those dots. So yeah, Dungeons and Dragons became cool at a point, and it blew up. And Stranger Things is now among those shows that I can point to and say, if you were ever curious about Dungeons and Dragons, watch the show. You might feel inspired to play, to become a player, or to become a dungeon master, because that sort of environment can change you. I know it did for me. Even as insignificant as it is in the grand scheme of things, of uploading those videos to YouTube and still being a failure in that regard, but it will still change you nonetheless. I can guarantee at least that much. You will grow as a person through this experience, regardless. And this show is a perfect gateway among the ones that exist currently for Dungeons and Dragons. And that, to me, in Stranger Things, is not so strange at all. It's just become the average, the expected, which is cool. I want more. And speaking of wanting more, in terms of the character coming out well, I will end on this note, because I had mentioned this on one of my other videos, this is among my longer reviews in terms of reviews. In terms of Will coming out, that was the end of his story, and then, he finds supposed love in his future thing. But who's to say that's canonical, or it, happens, literally? I don't know. Who's to say, right? Because, it's just Will narrating that's what's happening to the players necessarily in that scene, technically speaking. So who's to really say, right? In that regard, it is just a coming out story. And I know that it is going to upset people that were expecting the main ship to be a ship that would, as it were, set sail between him and the main character. And here's the thing, as I was already alluding to, is that one day, I'm still waiting for it, for a show to come out, and for indeed it to be a main character, much like Will. And the character does struggle, at least, to come out as gay. I would very much for that to be a follow-through, because apparently that still triggers some very sensitive people to this very day, I guess. Because, they have to be anti-woke for the grift. You see, grifting slop. So, this show clearly needs to exist. I wanted to write it myself. And animate it, in fact. I wanted it to be an animated show myself. So, for that animated show, the one that I dream of, one day in that horizon, for there to be a gay character, and for them to have that gay struggle. But for that to be the end of the story, I want that to be the middle of the story. I want a happy ending for a gay character, because I have yet to see it. Not one example. There is not one in the history of television that ends with the happy gay couple. Happy being the key word in that phrase. And well written. Let's not leave that out of the equation. Main gay character. Because I am really tired of seeing it be a side character. It being a joke. It being for drama. I'm getting really tired of that. I want something new. I want something that's daring. That's what I want to see in a show. Something that pushes the envelope in terms of that trope. Because I want to see the full conclusion of it. The actual happy ending. The actual payoff to all of this setup of real life that I have seen time and time again without fail. The gay character being written as a joke. The gay character that dies and is used, to bury your gays. The gay character that just comes out as he does in Stranger Things, but that is the technical, canonical ending of this story. Just coming out. And it is a forlorn moment. It is a relief moment. And it is an ending moment. But it's not a happy moment in terms of the full story. A full story that, for said gay character would, in conclusion of that, get to not only just find somebody, but we would get to see them with that somebody, and for that somebody to actually also be a main character. That, ladies and gentlemen, is nowhere else in media. There is not a single example I can point to. Not a one. Not a single one. It yet to exist in 2026. So for all this talk of woke propaganda, the gay agenda, I've heard so many times since the infamous birth of YouTube, or famous, infamous or famous, depending on how you view YouTube. No matter which side you land on, of creating content, in all of my years, and I have been at this for a decade, a failure of a decade, insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. I have been doing this for a decade, plus, at this point. I will at some point surpass PewDiePie for as long as I have been doing this. I will at some point be doing this longer than Game Theory, who's retired at this point. I will surpass them in terms of the length of what I have done. And yet, despite the length, I have sat on 200 subscribers to this very day. Goddamn. And through all of it, through my entire journey as not just a content creator, but as a viewer on this platform, I have seen the countless examples that has been brought up time and time again of the gay agenda, when this arose as a problem, apparently, in Hollywood. And every example that I had been given is still a handful. A handful. I could list them on my hand. On one hand. And if I'm being super generous, on two, if I drop my standards to secondary characters and so on and so forth and move along that path, sure. But in terms of main character, one hand. One hand. In the amount that have ended happy, as I just mentioned, 0. 0. with a happy ending, with a couple, with two characters, one maybe struggling, one maybe mayhaps not, so that they're slightly different in terms of their journeys, right? Having different characters and all that. Going from that point to them becoming boyfriend and boyfriend, because apparently being gay is stranger than being lesbian. Coming out as lesbian, as proof as very Stranger Things has proved, is more acceptable than coming out as gay in 2026. Despite it coming out in lore in the 1980s. Despite all of that, we still have people saying, oh, the gay character, though. It's the gay character. He can't have that. He can't even have the coming out moment. I want to have that coming out moment and move beyond that coming out moment. I want the end of that rainbow. I have not yet seen the end of that rainbow. To use the little gay metaphor figuratively and literally at the same time. I've not seen the end of that rainbow. I've not seen that example. I cannot point to that example and say that's what I'm looking for. And the gay agenda, what is it? What has it been this entire time? It's simple. It's 2 words. And I can boil it down to one. I can. It really can be boiled down to one word. Acceptance. That's all it's ever boiled down to. You see, that's the thing about anti-woke grifters. They use this phrase, the gay agenda, and, they use agenda as this overall negative connotation. I'm going to spoil the secret to their entire shtick right now, and I just did. That's their whole shtick, is to just keep saying the agenda, but they never explain what it is. It's a buzzword. It's a secret code word, you see. And it just eludes this nebulous idea that there's some ulterior motive to having gay characters in media at all. There's some secret. That there's some mystery behind all of it. But it all boils down to one word. And I'm giving the game away. I'm telling you the answer. It's been obvious since the phrase even came to be. Acceptance. It's all it ever is. It's all it's ever going to boil down to. That is what I want to see, is the full story of acceptance. That's all I ask. And for it to be well written, like Stranger Things, but the full story, not just the coming out part, that being the conclusion. For me, that isn't a satisfying conclusion. I get it, it's a conclusion for the story, I get it. I get that that's the conclusion for the story, I get it. I do. It makes sense. It follows. But for a new story, a story in the future, the story that does not yet exist, that's the story I'm waiting for. That's the story I want to make still. I want to animate it, but I can't animate for shit. I can only write. So I'm fucked. I can't do it. I can't do it alone, and I don't have the money to hire people. I don't have the money to hire animators. I don't have the money. I don't have a job. A consistent job. I don't get paid on YouTube anymore. I'm fucked. But to Stranger Things, to me this was a success. A brilliant success that rivals a top-tier show or movies for me. Because that finale was a movie in it of itself. Every finale has been. So this has gone long on for, again, as I mentioned, Lord of the Rings. This is longer, I think, than Lord of the Rings, maybe. I'm pretty sure it might be. Because every episode is generally around an hour. And that's 8 episodes with... So... yeah, I would have to do some serious math on that just to see, like, 8 multiplied by 8, because the amount of episodes multiplied by 2. Wait. Yeah, I would have to figure out what the math would be at all. Like, what the actual application of that math would be. It would be the full amount of episode multiplied by the length of the general length of the episode. I think that's how you would track the time accurately. I'm pretty sure. Anyway, that's for I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, I think Stranger Things is a masterpiece and a love letter to Dungeons and Dragons. That's my review of Stranger Things. I hope you enjoyed that, where I also talk about other things outside of the show, but hey, that just comes with the territory of this channel. Kind of. But hey, I jabber and I yabber sometimes, and I just sort of meander and go on off on these little tangents. But that I always feel are necessary for the video that I am making. In this case, I feel it was necessary this time around. So that is my full review of all of Stranger Things, Season 1 to 5. And if you ended up enjoying all 2 hour plus of my review of Stranger Things from Season 1 to 5, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And also make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers. I've created an entire series called Respect the Grind that shouts out smaller YouTubers myself. I'm doing my bit to help out smaller YouTubers find their voice. It is, you know, I'm doing my bit, but I can only do so much, and it's barely effective due to the algorithm and how it works and how it operates. So I can only do so much. But I also have a link to my PayPal where I don't have anyone supporting me through that anymore. So it would be lovely to have someone support me through there again so that I can have a job again. And last, to my Discord server, where you can join collab shell for free. It's amazing that I just allow that for free on my Discord, or other people. I've seen it. You have to subscribe and, you know, give them money to join their Discord. Mine's free. You can join it for free and do all the cool stuff for free. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye.